Everybody, what's going on? Chicago Trader checking in for the weekly fundamental video. I hope you guys are having a nice weekend here. Just wanted to recap one of the names that moved this week for RWLK. Had some news come out on, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday after hours that sent the stock up a couple 100%. With it. Its move, started to do some digging on it, and found some stuff that was interesting. I thought I'd share real quick. So I'll dig right into it. So, of course, guys, not investment advice on my behalf or MIC. Do your own due diligence on these names. Um, with that being said, so RWLK. So the timeline of this is pretty important as far as the day it moved and the next morning. And what I mean by that, so after that news was announced, before it was holding up in pre-market the next day, I was kind of going through doing some of these. So on 4/1, April 1st, they had $8.8 million. They had done an offering after that for 3.8. And then, if you guys recall, right before the open the next day, they announced that they exercised some outstanding warrants and received $10 million. So obviously, the day it moved in after hours, I didn't know at the time, and nor did nobody, that these were going to be exercised. So they were well in the money, but I was very surprised to see them exercise in pre-market. But with that being said, it should be right around $20 million in cash. They're burning, 1.3 million roughly. So not strapped for cash by any stretch of imagination. I can't talk today. But so, and then right here, so before they had announced that they exercised the warrants, the float was about 4.1, 4.2 million. And that was including the offering that they'd done a couple months before, and it was 815,000 shares. Um, and it's super important, and it's an error on my or their part, in my opinion, that they don't announce this at like 2:30 and they announce it after the close, because they have an ATM outstanding with the baby shelf too. Um, it always goes off the highest closing price, right? So the fact that it moved up a bunch in after hours and pre-market doesn't mean much. So they had to try to hold it up. So that was one of the reasons I thought that it might run. Um, but again, this is before. So if we go back to the chart, so before this day, the highest closing price in the past 60 days was 460. So you're sitting right around a $19 million float. So again, with the baby shelf, you can raise a third of that, which is about 6 million. So they can't really raise money. Give or take a million, they won't, even do it. But again, once they exercise these warrants, or were so nice to tell us that, which most companies will not. A lot of times, you got to wait for the 10Q. Now the float's at 5.6 million. But again, when they announce that in pre-market, you don't obviously know where the stock's going to close at, right? So obviously, looking forward, it closed at 740. So if you multiply the two, you're going to get a $41 million value of the float divided by three. So there's $14 million that they can raise, right? So they've already raised six. They can raise 14. So they can raise the difference, $8 million. They do have an ATM. So this is one of those things where, in my opinion, when you start looking at ATMs, and they've been outstanding for a couple of years and they haven't really used a ton of it recently, a lot of times there could be a myriad of reasons, but I think the most important is lack of volume, right? So you need volume to sell an ATM as an underwriter. And you come back, you kind of look at this chart in the last, what is this, 10 months, not much volume. I mean, even, this day there was a little bit, but they suspended it, and I'll get on to that here in a second. But that's why a lot of times when some company has an ATM outstanding that's old, I give it very little weight, especially when it's suspended. But get back to this. Where do I want to go with this one next? So going back to their page, they announced they're the nicest company. And I say that because they not only told us that, hey, we exercise warrants, but they announced this one for 25 reverse split. So the date on this right here was 4/1. So I just automatically assumed, as you guys know, a lot of times it's not coincidental that companies will do this, a day or two after their 10Q is filed. Makes it a little bit harder to, adjust with the reverse splits. But when you come here and look at it, they actually voted on this on the March 27th, which was a couple of days before that 10Q, right? So all the information in the 10Q is as of 3/31. So the reason I bring this up is not most companies will do this, but if you go back to the most recent two filings, it's Q1 and the 10K. So if you look at the 10K warrants on November 8th, 2018, rather, there was 44 million warrants with an exercise price of 0.3. Again, so it's deceiving because you come to the most recent 10Q, and it says as of March 31st. So I'm thinking, well, hey, this was filed on the 1st, so it probably doesn't account for it, but luckily I was able to. Obviously, you divide this by 25, this 44 million, and you take this times 25, and these are your numbers that you get. So these are accounted for the reverse split. Now, obviously, anything that was offered after the first, so this one probably wasn't. Yeah, so the warrants in this one do not need adjusted, right? Because this was announced after. So again, one of the reasons I initially thought, a couple of the reasons I thought that this thing might be higher and have a strong close. Obviously, you need to keep it up for the baby shelf, and also with the ATM. So in the most recent 10Q, let me scroll through here and give me a second to find this. Yeah, so the at the market offering, again, it's under the EDA, just another name for it with Piper, up to 25 million. You come down here and you look at it. This is kind of deceiving but funny at the same time. I guess could be perceived as a little bit bullish, if you will. So they temporarily suspended the ATM offering on the 20th, and it says that they have raised 15 million. And again, look, this ATM has been outstanding since May 2016, right? So obviously, if they wanted to use it, they would have used it and not done other offerings. And you can kind of see that since 2016, there's been no shortage. But it's funny to kind of look into why they suspended this. So February 20th, let's go back to the front page here. Look what happens on February 20th. They do an offering, right? So they really couldn't raise much money. I think that this one raised, let's see here. Yeah, up to 6 million. So again, if you go back to this, their float is right around there. So they've already that's the most they can raise is $6 million. So they have to suspend it. They can't use it unless this thing has a huge move up. With that being said, let me scroll on down. And then the other thing that was super interesting that another member actually I was talking with him about this paragraph right here. It's actually under this paragraph in the ATM offering. So you can look here in connection with the April 2019 registered direct offering and private placement. They said basically for a period of 6 months, they would not issue or agree to issue equity or debt securities. Basically, they're not going to do an offer, right? So that's kind of what it reads. But you kind of look onto it further. It says this does not apply to the offer or sale of the at the market program beginning May 5th, provided that the closing bid price of the ordinary shares exceeds 120% of 520 for 10 days. So basically, 120% of 520 is like 6.25. So they would have to, if they want to use the ATM, it has to be 625 for 10 days, and it wasn't. But this is where it gets super interesting. And again, this does not apply. This restriction to not raise money does not apply beginning June 5th, regardless of the trading price of the ordinary shares. Doesn't matter. As of June 5th, they'll raise. They can raise. So you can see that the PR conveniently comes out, after hours on the 4th, so June 5th, the next day when everyone's trading it. It's the same day. It's not coincidental. Let me scroll down here. I don't think there was really much else, but yeah. So again, kind of going back to here. So I think personally, again, don't take this as advice. They're going to do another offering if they want to, but maybe they hit the ATM as well. Oh, I forgot to skip some, or I skipped something. this right here, this 8K on the 9th. So this one was important too, because right, they suspended, quote unquote, their ATM right here on the 9th. They entered into an amendment with Piper, amending its EDA, dated, again, May 16th was when it came out, to extend the agreement's terms by another 3 years to make certain conforming changes. They can sell up to 25 million, but I think they'd use about 15 or 16 million. So I guess they can use about $9 million of it if they want. Um, so yeah, that it expired and they extended it. So again, if you just read the 10Q and didn't go through some of the 8Ks, which obviously this was filed after the 10Q, um, that you would totally miss this. What else do we have? Oh yeah, so and again, why would you do an offering when you have an ATM? Volume, huge thing. You need volume to sell into. If these guys could come out and do, you know, a million shares at 750, boom, they get that $7.5 million right away, right? ATM, if you want $7.5 million, going to be very tough and take a little bit with the volume that it trades. Um, Going back to this one too, this is always interesting. In the 8K that talks about the reverse split. So anytime, if you guys want to take note of this, when something does a reverse split, you always want to kind of check to see what the authorized shares do. A lot of times they'll go with it, right? So maybe if they're authorized, let's just say in this case they were authorized to issue 100 million shares and then they do a 1 for 25 split. A lot of times they will say, hey, we're only authorized to have 4 million. But this one, if you look, the company increased its authorized and registered share capital following a reverse split and increase in authorized shares. The total number of ordinary shares that the company has authorized to issue will be 60 million. So they actually upped it. So right, that's not a good sign. It generally says, hey, we need a lot of room to offer. So I didn't even look at what the outstanding shares were on this. 5 or 6 million maybe. Yeah, so it had 4.5 million shares, and that, of course, that's after the reverse split. So they come out and say, hey, we can authorize up to 60 million shares. Obviously, they have restrictions and stuff with the baby shelf before they get to that. But see if I missed anything else. But yeah, I mean, that was just kind of the plan. So I said, hey, look, and there's a couple of names I can't think of that have done that before, to where they announce in pre-market, like, hey, we used all of our ATM. AXSM was one, and then one of the other micro floats did it, where they said, hey, we exercised the warrants, the thing tanks, and then it actually trapped. So, I mean, I played the stock a little bit to the long side. It was nothing too crazy or whatnot. But um, yeah, so pretty much that's all that I had on the name. It'll be interesting to see, if they do any offering or anything like that. But I think eventually they will, even though they have enough cash. But these companies, um, anytime that they're up, they seem to raise. But just want to go through this one real quick, guys. Of course, feel free to DM me on it or anything else, and I'll try to help when I can. So have a nice weekend, and we'll see you in chat on Monday.